Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cybersecurity Leadership Series brought to you by Cyber Houston. We're excited to have you join us today. Well, today we're going to be discussing the impact, learnings, and experience from the differences in cybersecurity when making the transition from the public to the private sector. Our expert speaker will share lessons learned and advice from their leadership perspective. Today we're going to be looking into the insights of our speaker, of what they did at a high level at the state, discuss the transition to the private sector, questions they got asked, questions that everyone would like to know about working in the public sector with cybersecurity, favorite part about both those environments, and advice for anyone considering switching. Before we get started, just a quick housekeeping note. Please post your questions and comments in the chat section, and we'll do our best to get to all of those and answer them live. I'm Phil Beckett. I'm CEO with HASA Health Information Exchange, and I'm sitting in the interim chair with Cyber Houston, but I'm going to be your moderator today. Joining us today is a member and expert speaker from Cyber Houston. Cyber Houston's Daniel Hankins, and I will be introducing Daniel in a second. So, Cyber Houston's the Department of Homeland Security recognized information sharing and analysis organization. We're a coalition of volunteers representing leaders from business, cybersecurity, academia, government, and civic leaders. Our goal is to continuously educate and inform business leaders on how to manage and govern cybersecurity risks. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce Daniel Hankins. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
That's Daniel's Senior Director of Technology with Apollo Information Systems. Daniel advises and assists clients to assess their cybersecurity risks, identify and strengthen their gaps, and ensures that they meet their compliance requirements to conduct their operations in a secure environment. He works tirelessly promoting collaboration, awareness, and education of cybersecurity while researching new business opportunities to provide additional customer value in the cybersecurity arena. Daniel has over 25 years of experience in a wide range of information technology positions with both public and private sectors. And this is the important part, from being the State of Texas Cybersecurity Coordinator and chairing the Texas Cybersecurity Council, to working with private sector executives on incident response, opportunities to learn and share knowledge is where Daniel thrives. Daniel holds a Bachelor of Science in IT Management and Master of Business Administration from Western Governors University, and multiple certifications, including CISM, CISA, and ITIL. So big welcome, Daniel. Thanks for being with us today. I know we've got a lot to cover. So I want to start with giving you opportunity to talk about what you did for the state of Texas.
Yeah, so I was the state cybersecurity coordinator. The main role of that is actually chairing the Texas Cybersecurity Council, which I'm not sure if many people have heard of or not. But it basically advises the state legislature on cybersecurity initiatives around the state that they should be considering as the legislative session comes up. And the main role in that is making recommendations. We did it formally to the legislature that they then consider turning into law. So a lot of you may or may not have heard of Senate Bill 475. A lot of that language actually came from the Cybersecurity Council's recommendations last year. It was, in my opinion, a great win for the state of Texas because it puts a lot of stuff on data requirements and data security that was lacking beforehand. And it does some other things like create a volunteer incident response team. And I'll let you read it. It is quite a lengthy bill. I'm going to come back to the volunteer incident response team thing later because I still talk to the Department of Information Resources where I worked, and they asked me to share a couple slides, but I'm not really going to get into that. Before that, I ran security for the state's data centers in texas.gov. So if you've gone to texas.gov and done any business there at all, I had a hand in that. I ran IM teams for government. I worked for IBM for a while. And yeah, I've just pretty much poked my nose anywhere that seems interesting.
No, well, thanks. Yeah, no, and I want to come back to some of those things, but maybe the first question is, what inspired you, or what was the driver for moving from the state of Texas, the work you were doing there, into the private sector?
Well, to be blunt, there's two. The first one is, as everybody always knows, some people leave for money, and yeah, the private sector pays significantly more than the state does. And that's actually something I'd like everybody to remember when you're talking with public sector people. They do the job because they love it, not because they're in it for the money. If they were in it for the money, they'd be back in the private sector. But I really got an offer I just could not refuse. And if I had refused it, my wife would be dragging my lifeless body through the streets at this point. But yeah, the second one was, it was an opportunity to learn some things that I've always wanted to kind of dabble in. So I'm now in a role where I'm getting to see how the business actually runs, which is, in my opinion, great. As you mentioned, I have an MBA. I've always been interested in businesses. I love talking to business executives. But I always lacked a little bit of that behind the scenes of how private business runs versus public. And this is an opportunity that let me basically see behind the door. So, yeah, and it's been great.
That makes sense. Well, a question that intrigues me on this as well is, I've been in the private sector, and there's a lot of innovation in there that you can do. And I sometimes think that, maybe this is total bias, that the public sector not so innovative, but that may be a myth. Could you talk to a little bit about that, the opportunities you had to make a difference there?
Yeah, the running joke, at least that all the agencies I was at, was that the state is 10 to 20 years behind, but I've come to find that's really not the case. The state can't make money innovating, is really what it comes down to. I mean, everything is nonprofit. We're working off the taxpayer dollars. I say we and previous me. So if you invent something, it's going to become public domain, basically, but there's no really R&D funding either. So we looked towards private sector for what are the greatest and latest tools, and then there's a budget cycle that kicks in. So the state will come through, and we would constantly be talking to vendors. I mean, if you want to talk to somebody at the state, they're more than willing to listen. But the budget cycles kick in, so you are literally a year or two behind unless you've allocated money to do those upgrades in that contract. On the flip side, what I've come to find, and is actually one of the things I have here in my notes, when it comes to security, from all the clients that I've talked to, the state is well advanced. Now, it's all hidden behind public information law, so you can ask as many questions as you want about state security. Nobody's ever going to tell you. But it is night and day difference in some cases because everybody in the state knows what the minimum security standards are. If you walk into any IT shop in any state agency, they know they have certain requirements that they have to meet, and they're working very hard to meet those. And they also know that if they don't meet those, at some point an audit is going to come out, and it's going to say that they didn't meet them, and somebody is in a heaping world of trouble. In the private sector, if somebody doesn't meet audit requirements, I mean, what's worse, not meeting the audit requirements or just paying the fine? So, it's a business decision. At the state, you're protecting the public, so it's not really a business decision. You're going to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I definitely. That was one of my questions. So thanks for bringing that up. I'd love to dig a little deeper on that because there's the requirements are different between the private, the public sector. And the private, it's a business decision. It's more voluntary. On the public side, it's not optional.
Yeah, and you'll see people in the state that invent stuff, and sometimes the state will basically provide the resources to actually implement it. But if it's going to be a completely new, unique solution, a lot of the people end up going to the private sector and they start their own company and do it that way. So, because then they can make a profit off of it.
Right.
Yeah. So, and I apologize if you hear any background noise. Apparently, a bunch of mowers just showed up at my neighbor's house.
They do that in this work from home thing. So in that, and I know you can't, you're right. You answered the question, Daniel. You can't say what the state does and doesn't do because nobody's going to answer that question. But are the technical and human resources there in that environment? And it more than, again, going back to my own experience in the private sector, it's a business decision. You've only got X amount of dollars. You have to spend them as you can, and you put what you can towards cyber, but you have to make some maybe make some shortcuts. So you can't do everything. How it is in the public sector?
The public sector, the legislature hands over a lot of money to make sure that everything is secure. The funding is absolutely there. The skills, the cybersecurity workforce shortage is nationwide. It is hard to hire somebody in the state, especially at state pay. On the flip side, what I like to tout when I was with the state is if you want to come in as an entry-level person and you want to learn more than you ever knew was possible, go to the state. They will train you like you will not believe. And it's kind of funny. I meet with salespeople now in my current role, and one of them apparently didn't do his LinkedIn stalking, so he didn't realize who he was talking to, and he just blurted out, "Oh man, I hate meeting with state people because they ask you 1,000,001 questions, and you have to bring in 8 senior technicians to answer all the questions." And I just looked at him, and I started hounding him with questions because he was just annoying me.
Right.
But yeah, if you want to learn a tool or you want to learn something about cybersecurity, the state's not going to pay that much, but you're going to get all the knowledge on whatever tool that they hire you for, like you would not believe. So, and in the public sector, I don't quite see the same thing. You kind of hire into the position, and some places do training, but the vast majority that I've talked to, you're expected to know when you walk in the door, and there might be a little bit of learning on the job, but you're not going to get the same level of formal training. On the flip side, you're going to be a lot busier and bouncing around different projects in the private sector, at least my experiences. So, your choice.
That's a great insight, Daniel, and question, because as Cyber Houston, we're really working on, and others are, on the whole workforce and what the opportunities are there, how to get more diverse group of people engaged in it, and what a path is. Can you talk a little more about it, the career path into the public sector? Because it sounds like a great opportunity to learn.
Yeah. There's the easiest way is just to reach out and talk to somebody in the public sector. I know that they just hired a new cybersecurity coordinator. I don't know his name yet, but Nancy, the CISO for the state, texted me the other day and said, "Hey, we hired him." And I went, "Oh, great. Okay. Let me know when he's ready to talk." But yeah, talk to him, talk to the universities, come talk to me. And then there's a website, workintexas.gov or .com. If you just Google Work in Texas, you'll get to it. And it lists all the job applications. Now, the thing to note about state job applications is that they're typically written off the state comptroller's job descriptions, which list your key skills, abilities, and the actual knowledge you have. And that's what you're going to be scored against when you apply for a state job. And we very often got state job applications where people didn't read that and they didn't tailor their response to that. Or they would just upload the resume. But you actually have to fill out the entire application. But if you fill out the entire application rather than just upload your resume and you meet those key skills and abilities, which usually aren't much, go ahead and apply. And people will be happy that you just applied because we get so few applicants. The state gets so few applicants. I'm still having a hard time adjusting. Yeah. And then otherwise, show up at conferences and talk to the state people. Ask them, how did you get into your job? Because it's a small world. And if people start to recognize you, they're more than willing to pick up the phone and say, "Hey, I've got an opening. Apply. And if you're the best candidate, you get it." There's also internship programs. I know a lot of the state agencies, if they don't have internship programs, they're looking at opening them up now. The Higher Education Coordinating Board does a lot of work on actually working on getting degrees out and planning out degrees so that people can start to get into cybersecurity and they know the minimum baselines for that. But yeah, just talk to people. I have people reach out to me every day saying, "Hey, Daniel, how do I get into cybersecurity?" And I'll put their first foot on the path. Or if they already have a foot on the path, I'll help them make the connections to get that second foot on there. So.
No, that's great, Daniel. Yeah, because there is such a shortage of skilled people in both public and private sector. And if that's the path, that's really exciting.
And I will say for now, if you're having a hard time hiring cybersecurity people, Apollo posted 6 jobs 2 weeks ago, and we had 144 applicants on the first day. And asking most of the applicants that we actually interviewed, one of the number one draws for them was that we advertised that you can work from home.
Right.
So that apparently has a huge benefit for a lot of people right now. So we got applicants from all over the United States. And you're not going to be able to do that at the state. If you work for the state of Texas, chances are you're going to have to live in Texas. But we hired people from Philadelphia and Virginia and everywhere else because we just published it that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Although I think you can still, I work with Health and Human Services quite a lot, and a lot of them are working from home. I mean, they're in Austin, but or they're in Texas, but they're being somewhat flexible.
Each agency has their own requirements on how often you have to be in the office. But unless you want to fly to the state once a week or twice a week,
Right. I've got a bunch more questions for you here. Well, sort of thinking again, the connections between, I want to come back to yours, but also the connections between public and private is.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, thanks, John. What, where you've got security requirements at the state level, and you're needing to connect your state systems to the private sector, how does that work? Does the state then require that private company to have the same requirements?
Oh yeah, in fact, if you're a private sector company connected to state systems, you should probably double check your contract, especially this year, because that was one of the things the Senate bill did. If there's state data connected to your systems and you're processing it, it's going through your systems, or if it in any way touches it, there's security requirements and they pass down. And within the federal government, there's the authority to operate. So if you're a state system connected back up to the federal government, you need an authority to operate saying you've met the federal security requirements, which all the state systems do. And their requirements are very similar to the states, and the state tries to meet the states at least. So it's pretty easy to get an authority to operate when you're a state system. But the private sector now also needs to meet those same requirements connecting up to the state. And each agency, they're going to differ a little bit because you used Health and Human Services. You work with them a lot in your role. They have a lot of federal requirements that they also need to meet depending on which system you're connected to. And sometimes they differ a little bit, especially depending on the type of data, than, say, the Texas Plumbing Board. I don't know if they work with any private systems or not, but if they do, I'm willing to bet that their data is not going to be as confidential as somebody's health records. So their security requirements are going to be a little bit less.
Right.
Now, I may be wrong, and my apologies to the Plumbing Board if I am. I'm just using them as an example. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, be on the lookout for that because the state's absolutely going to be implementing that your contract vehicles. And I assume that if you're not meeting those security requirements and they come to an audit, you could lose your contract. Mm-hmm. And then there's also the state has a disbarred vendor list where if you mess up too many times, no state agency is allowed to do business with you. And if there's an active contract with you and you get put on the disbarred vendor list, I'm not a lawyer here, but this is just the hearsay I've heard from the lawyers. Yeah, you get put on the disbarred contract list, your active contracts are also terminated. So it's very important that you meet any requirements listed in your contract, or financial implications could be huge. So, yeah. And if you need any help on those, give me a call. I'll talk to you.
Coming back to you, Daniel, as you transitioned, what did people ask you? What were the questions you got asked most as you moved from the state to Apollo?
I love this one. My number one question I have gotten so far is, do you know what a SOC audit is? And that is promptly followed by, what tool can I buy to be SOC compliant? And I would just like to tell everybody here, if you don't know what a SOC audit is, there is no tool that you can buy to be SOC compliant. It's an entire organizational process. But yeah, I have gotten asked that one so many times. The answer is always yes and no.
Yes.
At the state, I was thinking about this, and at the state, the question was actually quite a bit different. It was, how can I talk to the business leaders? Or how can I talk to the private sector better? And I always promised people I'd get back to them and do a talk on it, and then I left the state and never got to it. But business leaders care about how much time something is going to take and how much it's going to impact their budget. And impact their budget either negatively or positively. So you can sell it as a win even if it costs them money. But if you really want to talk to your business leaders, sorry, Sam, SOC, not X. Yeah. But yeah, if you're talking to your business leaders, and I see this mistake a lot from people on the technical levels, yes, your shiny new tool is awesome. It does everything you want it to, and we know it's great. But we're also looking at the budget line. And if your shiny new tool costs $1 million and we only have $400,000 to spend, you're not getting your new tool. If it costs $1 million and we have $1 million to spend, you better really justify that tool and show how it's going to save money in the long run, how much time it's going to take to implement. And then it's not going to magically free up your time. We know this. We know that if it frees up your time, there's other work you can be doing. So highlight that. Hey, if I got this tool, I can then go ahead and do this, which would save this much time and save this much money rather than. So you have to sell it that way. Because I'm a business leader. That's how I think now. I'm like, is it worth my time and money to actually do this? So.
Yeah, so that's got in the public sector, again, as you said earlier, there's not a choice. So you got to do it, and we're going to throw in the private sector where you are now. You're having to sell that internally. Hey, I need the budget to do X, and here's Y, but we're not going to do. So what are the things that you take into consideration in those decisions now in the private sector that are different from the public?
Now I can actually make money. So I have massive spreadsheets I've created where it's going to take this many resources, it's going to take these tools, and then I add our profit percentage on top of it, and can we meet that? And that's one of the major differences is I go to the executive leadership team, aka board members, and I say, hey, we have this opportunity. It's going to cost us this much, but in return, we're going to make this much in the first year and this much each outlying year, and this is our growth potential with it. And sometimes it's a yes, sometimes it's a no, but I have that opportunity here. At the state, everything is a very fixed budget. So you might have a great idea, but you know that you have a fixed budget. Either you can afford it or you can't afford it. And if you need to request more money, there's ways to request it, but you have really better justify it. And then something for anybody here who's a vendor that likes to talk to the state needs to know. The state has a 2-year budget cycle, and the budget is published. It's usually either Senate Bill 1 or House Bill 1, and then there's amendments. But the budget cycle is published, and then that's what those state agencies typically live within. So if you're calling, say, December right after the budget cycle's released, we'll talk to you, find out about the tools, but chances are that money's already allocated. So you're not going to get the sale in January. In fact, no sales cycle in the state ever works that fast. So you kind of have to time it. And yeah, start building those relationships, but it's not going to be a quick sale going to the state. But once you've got the state, chances are you're there for at least 2 years.
On the requirements, say more federal requirements or for the state to meet. And where does that fall into the then budget cycle? The federal provide the dollars to do that?
They do have some grants that they provide. Sometimes the federal requirements you can see coming years in advance. For example, NIST, they open up their new requirements, and the state meets a lot of the NIST requirements as well because NIST basically guides all the federal ones. So we would monitor what the NIST requirements coming out. So NIST 853 revision 5, which has just been released, they published request for comments well in advance. So you could open it up and you can see, oh, they're going in this general direction. How can we meet what's coming out with what is already out there? And then we would kind of mesh the best of both worlds. And then if the federal agency comes out and says, hey, we have these new requirements, we're there. or if we're not there, it's a very minor lift to get there. It's not some massive overhaul because we've been working towards that the entire time. And then also we have federal contacts and they give you a little bit of heads up. Hey, we're going to require this type of system in 2 years. Okay, well, guess what? I'm buying that system the instant I have the money. Yeah. There's really no surprises. On the public side, I'm finding that a lot of people don't even know their requirements. So you walk into someplace and you're like, oh, did you know you're really supposed to be doing this because you have this kind of data? PCI data is a good one. Did you know that you have credit card data running through your systems? No, we outsource that. But we talked to this group over here. They have the credit card data stored on this drive. And you need to meet them. Yeah. Completely different world where all of a sudden, oh my gosh, there's shock spending.
So, and this is part of our role as Cyber Houston is education and awareness on what, in terms of what the rules are. Or are there opportunities for the public, for the state to make it easier to understand what those requirements are without reading the bills?
Yeah, there's the Texas Information Sharing and Analysis Organization. It's isao.texas.gov. You can attend those meetings. I know that when I was in the role, I would come to Cyber Houston and share the changes as well. Then it comes down to which state agency are you doing a contract with, because they all have those minor differences in cybersecurity requirements. And as you're in the negotiation phase of those contracts, all those requirements should be coming out. So they shouldn't be coming as a surprise. Now, if you decide to sign the contract, it's day one, and if you haven't implemented those requirements, that's on you. You knew those requirements were coming. But any other regulatory requirements, DIR has a webpage where they track legislation. The ISAO for the state of Texas, we would have the legislative lead come on, and she would cover all the bills that are where they are in progress, if they've been passed or if haven't been passed. And if you ever have any questions about legislation within the state of Texas and what they've done to cybersecurity, they have an email address. It's isao@dir.texas.gov, and they will reach out and dig up the answers. I mean, they work for you. They're public servants. So go ahead and ask them the questions, and they'll get you an answer if they're allowed to. I mean, if you ask them, hey, I need to know the password settings at the state's data center, you're not getting that. But yeah, if you say, hey, I need to know how to help implement password settings, they'll try and help you out.
Wow. Yeah. No, that's great information. Maybe again, you can say no because I'm asking questions that we're not allowed to know the answer to. But one of the things we do a lot, or maybe not as much as we should do, is with our own employees. The internal threats and phishing exercises, this kind of stuff. You've got some people. You were there at the state level, really as part of the security group, but there's a lot of state employees who are not. What was the education like for those not working in the field?
You still have cybersecurity education requirements. There's a bill that was passed back in 2017 saying that every single government employee in Texas needs to have at least basic cybersecurity. And then after that, it varies on how harsh an agency is on those cybersecurity requirements. The ones that have more stringent data requirements, they tended to be much more serious about everybody's cybersecurity because they have a lot more to lose. The ones that don't have anything confidential and you can just get it via public information request, it tended to be a little bit less on the cybersecurity because they don't really have anything to protect. But everybody who's a government employee within Texas needs to take at least basic cybersecurity requirements. And those are all published on the DIR webpage. You can see them there. If you need to meet phishing, for example, you gave it. Phishing was one of the things that every government employee in Texas needed to be trained on. This is what a phishing scam is, and this is how you identify it. So they've all had at least that training once a year. And so if you want to take that training, some of it's free. They have it up there.
Right. I was going to ask that. So as you've transitioned to the private sector, are you leveraging any of that material?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They have amazing incident response playbooks. We love to go through any material that DIR, the federal government, publishes. We love to go through it and glean what can we use out of this. I mean, it's a free resource. It's out there. Why wouldn't we at least take a look at it? And then we supplement it with ours, or we use theirs to supplement into our stuff. So if they come up and DIR, their new incident response playbook, they pulled out regulations for other entities that aren't Texas. And we went through and we had a list of all the regulations that we knew about. And so we double checked it with that. We went, hey, did they find anything that we didn't know about? Because they might have. And we almost treat it like an extra set of eyes. It's out there. It's available for everybody. Use it. So,
no, it makes sense because you think of a lot of things yourself, but we don't need to reinvent the wheel. And others have really thought about this. Use that as a starting.
Yeah. Their incident response playbook, I'm going to pick on it a little bit because they just released a new version of it. It's great, but it was also written a little bit more towards state agencies a little bit. But you could very easily open up their incident response playbook and go, okay, we should be doing these things, and then adapt it for your own use. So it's going to take a lot of time, but it's there. Or if you already have an incident response playbook, you can measure up and say, okay, the state advertised that they're doing at least this. Am I missing anything? Yeah. Well, use it. It's free. Why not?
That's smart, bro. Yeah. Now, I want to go back to our questions here. What's something that you wish everyone knew about public service?
I already mentioned it, but really the people, they're there to help you. They're not there for the paycheck. If they wanted a bigger paycheck, they'd be somewhere else. But they're there to help you. They're public servants, and they work for you. So don't be afraid of them. I went to a conference in San Antonio 3 years ago, and we had the DIR booth out, little DIR banner, and we're just there to help people. You come up, you talk to us, we'll help you out. And it was the first conference I'd went to where I was an actual DIR employee. And I was shocked at the amount of people that would purposely turn their head as walking by us. And then I came out later that they were afraid to talk to us, that they were afraid that somehow we would embarrass them or grill them on stuff and then go run off to the legislature and get a law passed, when that wasn't the case at all. I was just there simply to answer questions. I mean, we paid for a sponsorship at the thing. We were advertising, I think it was Texas.gov's data governance at the time. Can't exactly remember, it was 3 years ago. But I was there as the cybersecurity person, and just to answer cybersecurity questions. I mean, that was my job for the day. And I literally the entire day sat there and had one person come up to me. And I basically said, hi. And he said, you look lonely, hi. And then he walked away too. So, I mean, it was almost like an entire waste of state resources that day. I mean, I was there to help everybody, but everybody was just too afraid to talk. So yeah, go talk to the state people. I mean, that's what they're there for. They love to interact with you. So that's number one thing right there. So.
No, that makes sense. And that people are fearful, and especially in our current age, sometimes of misinformation. And you're doing a great job here of sort of evangelizing as well for them, and not to be scared of the state that they're going to spy on you and call you out for doing.
No, they're not even going to run to the legislature and say, hey, I heard that Phil's company did this and we need to make it. That doesn't happen at all. I mean, they just want to know how to make everything better for you in any way that they can. And even if it's just giving simple advice, they're more than happy to do it. So another thing that I just got tired of repeating it at state, but I figured I'd mention it here. You cannot buy a state person lunch, so please stop trying.
You can't even buy them a glass of water.
Right. I mean,
it run into that.
The state's procurement rules are very, very strict to make sure that there's no undue influence. Right. So play within the rules, because if you don't, I've seen plenty of vendors get disqualified the instant they broke one of the rules. So stay within the rules. They're not very hard. Don't buy them lunch. I'm sure they would absolutely love it. There's gift limits at conferences, so make sure you're staying within the gift limits, the stuff you can hand out at the booths. And each agency differs a little bit, so don't give somebody a hard time if they come from an agency that can't accept gifts. and the person right next to them that works at a different agency can. So, yeah, don't give them a hard time. They're not going to take the back scratcher because their agency said no. So, yeah, it's simple stuff like that. But if you violate it, you basically disqualified yourself from working with the state, which is a huge loss of revenue.
Right.
Yeah.
And you've mentioned a little bit of this earlier as well, but sort of your favorite part of being in the private sector, you know, the salaries are higher than with government work, but some of the other things.
I can just whip up my credit card and pay for something. It is surprisingly liberating to say, I need some Cat 6 cables, and just run over to Best Buy or hop on Amazon and buy some, and then just put in an expense report and get them back. I don't have to go get a pre-approval for pretty much anything. I mean, within my company, we have a spending limit where if I break that limit, then I should probably go get approval first. But if it's something minor, it's very liberating not having to worry about, oh, I need to go get approval first, and then I have to wait for the approvals to come back, and then I can go procure it. No, just pull up my credit card and pay for it. So same thing with the lunches. I can take people out to lunch now. It's absolutely great, and I understand why salespeople always wanted to do it. And now that I'm on the flip side too, I mean, I'll take people out to lunch all the time, but yeah, it's different. It's almost, in a sense, freeing because you're not worried about those procurement rules unless you're dealing with state people. But yeah, right. I mean, I could meet you, Phil, for lunch tomorrow and buy you lunch if you want.
Right. And vice versa. It's true. We have that freedom.
Yeah.
It's not.
You just don't realize it when you're working with the state how much different it is to saying, no, I can't have that. And all of a sudden, you know, you're like, wait, yeah, I can. So, yeah.
I know I'm going to, call out to our audience. You know, I don't have to ask all the questions. I'm sure they've got good questions. Please put those in the chat if you can. And but you were going to talk a little bit about incident as well. With your slides?
Oh, sorry. Let me see if I can figure out how to share them. Or Sam, are you able to pull them up? There we go. Yeah, so as I mentioned, I still talk to the people at Texas Department of Information Resources. A lot of them are my friends, so we'll just meet informally. Don't worry, I'm not buying them lunch or anything. I don't have any procurements going with them anyway, but just to be safe. But as part of Senate Bill 475, the legislature asked DIR to stand up a volunteer incident response team, which would be used in cybersecurity emergencies. And so I asked DIR, I said, hey, I heard that you spun it up. Do you have some slides I could share? And every time I'll do a presentation, I'll go ahead and share the slides because it's public service and it's volunteer. I'm a member of the volunteer incident response team, so I might as well spread the word. But they have stood it up, as I mentioned, part of Senate Bill 475, and there's the Texas Government Code if you're a lawyer and you want to read it. But DIR hosts this, and if there is a cybersecurity emergency within Texas, like when the 27, 28 government entities got hit a couple of years ago, and it's to the point that DIR itself cannot respond, or they can respond, but they need additional resources. The volunteer incident response team can be tapped on to provide additional resources. And it's not just executives, it's also people that can work on Windows servers if Windows servers are an issue, or people to help rebuild desktops. Somebody who can go out there and look at a network and say, hey, I can tell that you were architected this way, even though it's been blown away. Let's rebuild it this way. This is what you're going to need. And even sometimes just to help calm people down. A lot of the times when I responded to incidents, it's once you get them past the panic phase, great. But yeah, so they stood up this volunteer incident response team just in case they need help. It's not paid. It's entirely volunteer, but if you want to, I guess you could throw it on your resume. But they have a little questionnaire that they ask you, what skills do you bring? Have you ever been involved in an incident before? And then if the governor ever declares a cybersecurity disaster, they can tap on you as a resource. And you have the opportunity to say no. You have the opportunity to say yes. But it gives you incident response experience and lets you help out the public if you want to. So figured I'd advertise it. If anybody is interested in being part of the Texas Volunteer Incident Response Team, feel free. I'm sure they have more slides here. Oh, there you go. Yeah. So it went live December 1st. I'm not going to read the entire slide to you. They do have a handbook. It has all the legal jargon in it. You know, you must accept the deployment beforehand. Otherwise, you don't get to just show up. So they are working on ways to get training to the volunteer incident people so that they make sure that you get a consistent, nice, customer-friendly response out there. So free training. Woohoo. They are asking if you have some incident response experience. That would be great right now, so that it's not just a panic everywhere phase. That's my terminology, not theirs. By the way, all of this is my terminology. I don't work for them anymore. So, yeah. If you have some incident response experience and want to help, they really want to talk to you then. So just go ahead and apply. Technical skills, non-technical skills, throw your name in there. They'd be happy to talk to you. Happy to get you onboarded. You are going to have to pass a background check, just a warning. I mean, anybody who does on state resources does. You're not going to be a state employee because you're a volunteer. So no paycheck, guys. So I don't even know if that even qualifies you for saying, yes, I'm a government employee at the hotels. So I wouldn't bother risking that.
But you can still accept lunch because you're a volunteer.
I would assume so. I mean, I'm still going to accept lunch. And if I get in trouble for that, apologies. I mean, now I'm in a position where I can just pull up my credit card and pay for my own lunch. But the times I did volunteer, or not volunteer, when I did work at the state and we did have major incidences, lunch was provided. So,
yes, that's good. Oh, on this, so again, in terms of the education and engagement level, it seems as well like what's in it for me as a volunteer. Do they have meetings where they discuss how to do incidents, or brainstorming?
They just set it up, but I do understand that they are going to have meetings so everybody gets familiar. So connections, you'll have some connections ability there. They are going to have trainings. I haven't gotten the full scope of the trainings yet, but I'm sure that there's going to be some. Now, I'm assuming it's probably going to be more incident response training. Think along the lines of the Texas Department of Emergency Management. They have volunteer teams as well, like volunteer firefighters that go out and firefight. So I'm assuming a lot of the training is going to be more along those lines rather than, hey, this is how you stand up an Active Directory domain controller and click this and click this. Although they may surprise me. They may come back and say, hey, do you want Active Directory training? We have a bulk rate. Here you go. Go ahead and sign up. So I know the entire point of this was, first, the state needs resources in a major cyber incident. And there's only so many people that work for the state. And then local governments, if one, like back in 2018, hits again, there's just too many. The DIR does not have that many people to send around the state. So the way I'm viewing this is you get the connections, and then you get the experience, and then you have an opportunity to help out the public. And hopefully, we never get called.
Right.
Yeah, because getting called is really bad.
That's right. Yeah, I know. I was going to ask you that. Putting your crystal ball, looking into where do you see, and especially given Texas, and our big infrastructure with oil and gas, and so where you think that our high risk is for an incident, where it might hit?
Not a state agency. I would say probably a smaller either corporation or entity somewhere out away from a major city, because major cities have the money.
Yeah.
And they share the money and the knowledge. It's the smaller corporations, the smaller entities that are out there away from everybody. And they do talk amongst themselves, but it's not the same as sitting in Houston with well over 1 million people who have tons of cybersecurity experts talking amongst themselves. So it's that little regional focused knowledge. And then if it's like the 2018 incident, it could be literally anywhere across the state, because we do have so many service providers that provide services across the state to not only government entities, but private ones. And if the right service providers get hit, and even the state doesn't know that because we don't, people just don't talk to us. But if the right service provider gets hit, it could be statewide, it could be nationwide. It just depends on who.
Right.
So we really don't know where the next attack's going to come from. Is it going to happen? 99% sure, yes. Hopefully not in our lifetimes, but if it does, I'm there to help, and hopefully some of you are as well.
Right.
Yeah.
No, thanks, Daniel. Again, I'll reach out to our audience if they've got any additional questions for you. But I wanted to wrap this up with any closing thoughts or advice for those considering moving from either the private sector into the public or vice versa.
If you're looking at going into the public sector, as I mentioned before, prepare to get intimately familiar with things. I mean, the public sector really specializes in whatever subject they specialize in. And if you want training, seriously, go look at the public sector. I highly doubt there's very many places where it can be beat. So yes, the pay is less, but you're going to learn so much. On the flip side, you are going to probably be doing the majority of whatever you were hired to do. On the private side, it's the exact opposite of that. You will make a lot of money, but you're going to be bouncing around projects like you would normally. There may be some organizations where you do the same thing over and over again, but that's one of the things I love about the private sector is I just look at another project and say, hey, I want to do that, and off to the races I get to go. So yeah, it's completely different in those aspects. It's a very different working style. So I answer the phone at 10 p.m. now. When I worked with the state, if I answered the phone at 10 p.m., it was an emergency. So now I just answer the phone.
Right.
Yeah. You know how it is, Phil. So.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah, take a good hard look. And if you really want to get into cybersecurity, I absolutely encourage you to look at the state. I mean, they have great training programs, as I mentioned. So go for it.
All right.
I see that there's a question on any VERT initiatives in California. I am not sure. And California is a little bit different in the way that they do their IT. So you might ask their, oh man, I can't even remember the name of their group right now, but they have an IT department, and it wasn't called like in Texas where it's the Information Resources Group. But you might just ask them, but I haven't heard of one. In fact, I think Texas is a little bit ahead of the game in that aspect.
This is impressive. It's right behind you, Daniel. California.
It is. I mean,
there's redwoods.
The picture was taken. Yeah. By the way, beautiful state. If you've never visited, I encourage you to visit. Yeah. So can't say anything about living there because I've never lived there. Yep.
Well, if we don't have a last opportunity for questions or closing remarks, Daniel, and I'll say thank you again for doing this. It's great chatting with you. Great information. I think you really summarized well and gave experiences and the contrasts of both the private and the public sector in cybersecurity.
Thanks. And I'll put my email address in the chat. I don't know if the guests can see it or not, but if they have any questions whatsoever, I mean, volunteer incident response team, what regulations are, if they need help in their company or something, shoot me an email. I reply to everybody. So think of it as like basically a free consultation. So yeah, shoot me an email. I'll try and get you an answer. And if you have a government question, shoot DIR an email. They love to talk to you. So yeah.
Thanks again, Daniel. Pleasure having you. Thanks for the great information. Thanks for volunteering, and talk to you soon.
Thank you, Phil.
Well, thank you. Again, thanks to all our viewers and listeners today. Thank you for spending time with us. I hope this was useful and enjoyable, and that there's opportunities in there. The presentation will be available on the Cyber Houston Facebook page, the YouTube channel, and the cyberhouston.org website. So if your friends, colleagues want to view this later, it will be posted out there. Please subscribe to our Cyber Houston YouTube channel and follow our Cyber Houston Facebook page. And And remember to hit the notification button to receive updates on new cybersecurity leadership content. We will continue to have these series. At Cyber Houston, we take lessons learned from our enterprise members, distill them into sensible economical guidance to help small and mid-sized businesses improve their cyber posture and build resilience. We're here for you and committed to the economic vitality of all enterprise with a sharp focus on our small and medium-sized businesses. This guidance comes in the form of our Business Vitality Guide, guidance for the Board of Directors, a cyber preparedness assessment, available as PDF as well as online. If you want to do it privately, you can just download the PDF, and the free Cyberscan. All these resources are available free of charge and can be found under the resource tab on the cyberhouston.org website. A special thanks to our sponsors. We couldn't do this without them, with Hewlett-Packard, Blue Lance, Reneka Digital, and the University of Houston downtown. And thank you all. Until later, remain cyber strong. Thank you.